One of the many reasons why I believe that the WWE will never fail as a wrestling organization is because it's never going to be starved for talent. In theory, the WWE never even needs to go out and look for free agents in the independent circuit or in international markets in order to feed the main roster machine, because they can just look internally for their next top star in the NXT system. A system that has already supplied the WWE with some of the biggest names ever in the history of this sport. A system that to this day still continues to supply the main roster with some of the most talented young performers on the planet. So clearly it's a system that works, and one would assume that if you're able to reach the top of the mountain in NXT, that you're likely to reach the top of the mountain at some point on the main roster. But the fact of the matter is that's just simply not true. So in today's video, we're gonna look at every single NXT champion and we're gonna see where they're at today. Are they still in the WWE? Are they retired? Are they in different wrestling organizations? We're gonna explore all of that. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications. If you're a wrestling fan, I'm confident you're gonna fall in love with his YouTube channel because we always upload daily wrestling content. All right, let's jump into it. Let's start things off by looking at the first ever NXT champion, which happened to be Seth Rollins. And yes, I'm aware that before NXT, there was FCW as WWE's developmental system, and before that, it was Ohio Valley Wrestling. We're not gonna be looking at those champions. We're strictly looking at the NXT champions, and the first ever NXT champion ever was none other than Seth Rollins. Remember that when I said earlier in this video that the NXT system had already supplied the WWE with some of the biggest names ever in the history of this industry? Well, Seth Rollins kind of checks off that mark, as he's absolutely one of those names, because he would go on to the main roster, join the Shield, become a perennial main eventer, and he's still that to this day. He's not a champion at the moment. He was a world heavyweight champion earlier this year, but he's still embroiled in one of the most highlighted marquee feuds going into a major show like SummerSlam, and he will continue to be a perennial main eventer, going after world championships and being in the spotlight at any moment that he's on TV, because he is one of the biggest names in the sport today and in the history of the sport. The next NXT champion was Big E Langston. Big E Langston would defeat Seth Rollins and become your NXT champion. And my goodness, I forgot how ugly that NXT belt is. I'm so glad that they changed this thing. But at the time, Big E Langston was one of the most promising young talents that the NXT system was building up. He would go on to the main roster and have a great career. He would become a Money in the Bank winner. He would become a WWE champion. He would join one of the most iconic WWE stables of all time and become one of the greatest tag team champions ever as a member of the New Day. Unfortunately, his career was recently cut short a couple of years ago because of a severe neck injury due to a botched belly-to-belly suplex handed by Ridge Holland. And in today's landscape, he is a panelist for the WWE team. He appears in all of the pre-shows, he does interviews during PLEs, and there is still a hope being held by not just fans, but Big E himself, that he might be able to return to the sport at some point. He is still in those important prime years where he could still come back and have a great back half of his career should doctors allow it. You know, again, fingers crossed, but at the end of the day, I want Big E to make the best, healthiest decision for himself possible. The next NXT champion after Big E Langston was none other than Bo Dallas. Bo Dallas was one of the most annoying NXT champions at the time. He was really the first NXT champion that people loathed, not just like hated. He had an aura of go away heat that they really leaned into later, deeper into his NXT championship reign. However, nowadays he is an entirely different human. He is still in the WWE, but Bo Dallas is no longer Bo leaving. He is now the leader of one of the most talked about factions in the sport today, the Wyatt Six, having this dual personality where he is Bo Dallas at times, also is Uncle Howdy. He, as of the making of this video, has not made his in-ring debut, but we can assume or guess that we're likely going to be seeing him at SummerSlam, something to do with the Creeds or Chad Gable, we shall see. But right now, he is one of the most talked about characters in professional wrestling today. We don't know if they're going to stick the landing to this yet, but so far, what they've presented to us is something that people are clamoring for and people have their eyeballs glued to the screen for. So there's a lot to be really optimistic about with the current trajectory of Bo Dallas, the Wyatt Six, Uncle Howdy. The next NXT champion was Adrian Neville. Yes, did you know that he had a first name? Because when he got called up to the main roster, there was this thing with Vince McMahon where he, for some reason, didn't like first names, and he would just randomly remove parts of names for people when they would get called up. Biggie Langston was a good example because he went from Biggie Langston to just Big E. Another example was, of course, Austin Theory. For a while just became Theory. And Adrian Neville not only was the guy that Gravity forgot, but is also the guy who first name everybody forgot because he got rebranded to just Neville on the main roster. On the main roster, unfortunately, it never really got going. He spent some time in 205 Live, had a great run in the WWE as a heel, but clearly there was no long-term vision for him, and I think he recognized that, and he left the WWE, and he would go over to AEW, where he's still at this to this day under the name of Pac. Now, you can say that he's had various up and down levels of success over there. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of injuries during his time in AEW, but whenever he is on screen in AEW, he's one of the most compelling characters with his current persona of the Bastard Pac that works as both a babyface and as a heel, and his in-ring stuff is still mesmerizing to this day. Clearly, not only has Gravity forgotten him, but apparently age and time has forgotten him as well. After that, we have to look at Sami Zayn, who had arguably the most memorable run to the NXT Championship at the time. This was what I would say the feud and the storyline that really started getting a lot of eyeballs on NXT, the chase for gold for Sami Zayn. He eventually got there. He would lose the championship pretty soon afterwards, and then injuries would start to become a problem in the early years right after his time as NXT champion, but he would eventually find it. He would put it together to the point where he would become a main eventer on the main roster. Today, he is the Intercontinental Champion, but I would say that he is a guy that is at the top of the game. He is a guy that is in the main event scene. He's a guy that recently main evented a WrestleMania. He may not be winning world championships, but he clearly is held in high regard and can be inserted into major feuds at any moment. He's still with the WWE, in case you obviously didn't know that. Finn Balor is one of those curious cases where he was actually NXT champion across various generations of NXT, because he was one of the early black and gold NXT champions, but he also was a pandemic era NXT champion when he went down to NXT for a little while in the 2020s. In NXT, he was revered, he was loved. People saw a super bright future for him, which is why he was drafted to Monday Night Raw right after his time in NXT, and he immediately won the Universal Championship. Unfortunately, we know how that story goes. Injuries take over, and then when he comes back, there's no, I don't know if it's trust or maybe the idea train had left by that point, but it never really got going for main event Finn Balor, sadly, after that injury. Today, he is a member of the Judgment Day, one of the most recognizable factions in the WWE, but he unfortunately isn't standing out as a single star, and I just don't see main event run happening anytime soon. He's currently a tag team champion, so there's something to be said about that, but really he's fading in the background behind people like Dominic Mysterio, behind Rhea Ripley and Damian Priest. So hopefully at some point they do something better with my boy Finn Balor, because he's too damn good to be the fourth best most utilized character in the Judgment Day.
He does. Why would you wear
Whoa!
fake ones? Oh, look at that.
See? Okay.
Time.
Oh. That was cool. Through! Get the pin, Cena!
Go.
Oh my God.
Oh God. Then Roman.
Folks, that was a sneak peek of this week's Wrestling is Cool SummerSlam Match Club, which is available exclusively over on patreon.com/SantiZap. This week, we're looking at Ricochet versus AJ Styles, SummerSlam 2019. The 2016 WWE Championship match between Dean Ambrose and Dolph Ziggler. The SummerSlam Classic at SummerSlam 2016 between John Cena and AJ Styles. A street fight between Dominic Mysterio and Seth Rollins at SummerSlam 2020. And the iconic SummerSlam 2022 main event event between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. You're going to get those 5 watch-alongs alongside the Raw review, the SmackDown review, and the podcast 3 days early. That's 8 pieces of extra content, all available on patreon.com/SantiZab. I'll put the link at the top of the description or in the pinned comment, but I'm confident that if you even give it 1 month that you're going to fall in love with it. Now back to the video. Samoa Joe was also, just like Finn Balor, a guy that won the NXT championship across multiple generations, a 3-time NXT champion. In fact, he was, I would say, one of the greatest NXT champions of all time. Iconic, legendary feud with Shinsuke Nakamura. I actually saw him win his 2nd NXT championship at NXT TakeOver Toronto back in 2016, just as a little fun fact. Today, Samoa Joe is over in AEW. His run in the main roster in the WWE never really was given an opportunity, even though people wanted to see more of Samoa Joe, but it was a lot of start-stop, and clearly, just like Pac, Neville, just a lack of vision as to what to do with him in the long term. He was eventually let go from the WWE, appeared over in AEW, and he's had a lot of success over there, not only as a beast in AEW, where they actually have been using him properly, unlike the main roster WWE, but he was also one of the most dominant recent AEW world champions that we've seen. So I think it was a great move for him to go to AEW, in my opinion. The curious story of Shinsuke Nakamura, one of the most popular, most over guys ever in the history of NXT, multi-time NXT champion. It should have been a lock. It should have been a lock that he'd go over to the main roster and he would be an instant global megastar, but not all of them, unfortunately, can be Seth Rollins, because Shinsuke Nakamura just would not be given the same treatment on the main roster as he was given in NXT. He is currently missing, MIA. He's on SmackDown, but as of the making of this video, I haven't seen him appear on SmackDown since he's been drafted. He's been having backstage vignettes that play every like 4 weeks. So I'm a little bit concerned with the future outlook of Shinsuke Nakamura, if I'm being honest with you. Bobby Roode was so much fun as an NXT champion. But the era of Bobby Roode as an NXT champion is entirely underrated. A lot of people think that, hey, he was just a fun entrance theme. Nah, man, Bobby Roode was a great character. He was great in ring. And yes, that entrance theme and his entrance and the presentation overall on NXT was just freaking fantastic. On the main roster, similar story to a couple of these guys that we've already talked about. Similar to Shinsuke Nakamura, like he just never really got a chance to do the same thing on the main roster as he was given over on NXT. So winning the NXT championship, clearly, as you're seeing here, is just not a instant guaranteed recipe for main roster success. Currently, he is a producer for the WWE. He suffered a major spine neck injury that forced him to retire, but he's still working under the WWE umbrella, just in a backstage role. This Scottish psychopath was one of my favorite NXT champions of all time. I would say one of the most dominant NXT champions of all time as well. Going to NXT was a blessing for him. He left the WWE during his time as 3MB, really found himself in the independent circuit, came back to the WWE under NXT, and showed the world why he's just so goddamn awesome and undeniable. Today, I would say he's one of the best things going on in the world of professional wrestling. Won multiple world championships, headlined WrestleMania 37, won the WWE championship there, won a Royal Rumble, recently won a Money in the Bank briefcase, but I don't know if we necessarily want to talk about that. And he's embroiled in what I would say is the best feud in WWE right now against CM Punk. So things are going very good for Drew McIntyre at the moment. Andrade Cien Almas was his full name over in NXT. He was the NXT champion, and seeing this photo makes me so goddamn sad because Zelina Vega and Andrade together were just magical. She is such a great manager, such a great mouthpiece. It's probably why they've been giving her the mic a lot more lately, because she absolutely torches people on the mic, and she did that back in NXT on behalf of Andrade Cien Almas. Look, the whole Cien Almas thing never really caught on with people, but now he is El Espidolo. He's our current WWE Speed Champion in terms of the main roster. He's getting opportunities. He's having great matches, but nothing that is juicy enough to really start to unpack. I don't really see right now a long-term vision with Andrade, but I guess he's El Speedolo, the speed champion, so that's good, I think. Aleister Black, one of my favorite NXT champions, maybe one of the coolest entrances in the history of the WWE. I'm sure you're starting to see a trend here. We are in an unfortunate stretch here of guys that would win the NXT championship that just would not be able to find their footing on the main roster, whether it was because maybe just a poor transition, maybe they weren't a good fit. But let's be honest, this is because Vince McMahon just didn't know how to use them properly, because if in the 2010s, if your name wasn't Roman Reigns or Brock Lesnar, who the hell cares about you? That's the sad reality of like 2015 on up until about 2020 in the WWE. He would go to the main roster, again, just not be able to find that footing, not be given the same opportunities, which was a shame. And basically the WWE drove him to leave WWE and go over to AEW under the name of Malachi Black, where he's had various success there as well, leading a faction called the House of Black. Again, one of the coolest things in the WWE, one of the best presented individuals and factions. So AEW figured out how to use him way more, at least, than the main roster. No one has used him better than NXT, in my opinion, though. Tommaso Ciampa, I would say that he probably figures to be a lot of people's favorite NXT champion. He wasn't mine, but mostly because I was a Johnny Gargano guy and he screwed over Johnny Gargano. Anyways, I'm starting to show the mark in me here, but his run in NXT was awesome. His love and adoration for that championship that he would call Goldie was fantastic. The Blackheart of NXT, one of the most vile heels that the brand had ever seen. To this day, he's still with the WWE. He hasn't been able to find that same level of success, and it's been a slow build, but I think that we're maybe slowly starting to get over the hump here with Tommaso Ciampa. Currently, he is the WWE Tag Champions with Tommaso Ciampa, and before he became the NXT Champion, he was NXT Tag Team Champions with Johnny Gargano. So maybe we could start to emulate that success by having them be Tag Champions on the main roster first. Johnny Gargano was also the NXT champion, and also pretty much insert everything I just said about Tommaso Ciampa and put it here as well. He was one of my favorite NXT champions of all time. Just like Tommaso Ciampa, he is also the WWE champion, and just like Tommaso Ciampa, it's been a slow grind, a slow build, but I also think that with Johnny Gargano, we're slowly starting to figure it out, and he's slowly starting to win over the crowd here. Adam Cole, one of those guys that should have been a lock. I don't know how this was screwed up. One of the best ever in terms of accolades, in terms of number of defenses, in terms of how over he was. He is a legendary status level of NXT champion. He should have been a lock to be an instant success on the main roster. What did they want to do with him? Well, he's a small dude. Let's just make him a manager, which is just so blindingly stupid that Vince McMahon would want to turn one of his best assets in the ring and as a character into just a manager. Like, talk about just being so hard-headed and frankly stupid. I do not understand that. They, just like Malachi Black, Aleister Black, they drove him out of the WWE because if I'm Adam Cole, why the fuck would I want to be a manager when I know that I'm one of the best wrestlers in the goddamn planet? He's over in AEW. He's currently off screen. I don't know if it's selling an injury from MJF, like the beatdown from MJF, but he's also been dealing with a really severe ankle injury that's kept him out for almost a year at this point. So unfortunately, his time in AEW has been a lot of that. Like, he had a really severe set of concussions in AEW, and now this ankle injury has caused a lot of start-stop with Adam Cole. But anytime that AEW is able to use him when he's healthy, he's freaking amazing and delivering some of the best matches. I think we can look at All In against MJF at last year's All In Wembley as like one of the best matches that I've ever personally seen. And this storyline where him and MJF were like best friends to the betrayal, it was just fantastic. And then the freaking freak ankle injury, sadly. Oh man, honestly, this just hurts me to see these names here. Keith freaking Lee. Do you see this? He is holding the NXT championship and the North American championship. That is a guy that was given basically the kingdom of NXT and told, we are anointing you as the next guy to go to the main roster and have an awesome run and have an awesome career. You're going to be going against the Lesnars of the world, against the Romans of the world. What happened on the main roster? They changed his look, made him wear a onesie, gave him the moniker of Bearcat for whatever reason, and then just proceeded to not use him in a way that was successful over in NXT. It was like the WWE was like actively trying to sabotage poor Keith Lee. What happened? Now he's in AEW. Also not being used very well. So I don't know what the deal is with these major wrestling companies and fumbling Keith Lee. Keith Lee's contract in AEW is about to expire, so we'll see where he ends up. The independents back in WWE under Triple H, where he was booked the best, is a possibility. But all I know is that AEW has also not been able to properly use Keith Lee, in my opinion. Karrion Kross was given everything when he joined NXT. Like, he had the best presentation, the best entrance, the best look. He was booked like $1 million, given the world championship in NXT, and then goes to the main roster. Vince McMahon gets his grimy little fingers on him, puts him in gladiator kinkwear, and just completely destroys poor Karrion Kross's career. Unfortunately, he's just never been able to gather this same, as the kids would say these days, aura that he had back during this time in NXT Black and Gold. And he also, this is interesting to note, his entire run in NXT Black and Gold was great, but it was all in the pandemic era. He never got to experience an NXT takeover crowd, which just sucks, because he had like the perfect NXT takeover type of entrance and aura and allure. Nowadays, he is still in the WWE, but has just not been able to recapture that same feeling when he was bald Karrion Kross, unfortunately. And I don't think that he's ever going to climb the top of the mountain in the WWE and even get close to that level of success that he had in NXT. Right now, he's the leader of a faction called Final Testament, which in its own right is also just pretty meh. Bron Breakker, we're back, fellas. We are back with a WWE superstar that wins NXT Gold and is destined for success. They can't screw this one up. I really believe that they finally sorted out the formula after just this stretch of botching people's call-ups, because right now he is on the main roster as of the making of this video. He is feuding against Sami Zayn for the Intercontinental Championship. He looks like a lock to win it at SummerSlam. He looks like a lock to win multiple world championships. He looks like a lock to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. At least that is the feeling and the presentation that we're getting, which is way more than we can say for people that should have had this same presentation, like Adam Cole, like Aleister Black, like Keith Lee, like Samoa Joe, like Shinsuke Nakamura. They sorted it out with Bron Breakker. This was neat. Dolph Ziggler for a while went down to NXT when it was rebranded as the colorful rainbow NXT 2.0 and won the NXT championship over there in what I think was a really, really fun run, and what I also think really started the trend of guys that were being misused or just miscast in the main roster to go down to NXT and refine themselves. And Dolph Ziggler, in my opinion, still didn't change top brass's mind on the main roster. He was still let go, but now he's the world champion over in TNA. He just won the TNA World Heavyweight Championship at TNA's biggest show of the year, TNA Slammiversary. So congratulations to Nick Namath, which is now the name that he goes by in the independents, in New Japan, and in TNA. These will be super quick because these are really recent. Carmelo Hayes was an NXT champion. He was recently called up to SmackDown. Not really doing much just yet, but really his career on the main roster is less than like 7 months old at this point. So there's still just a lot of time to figure things out, but he gets time pretty much every single episode of SmackDown and is routinely putting on the best match of the night and even pinned Randy Orton. Very similar story with Ilja Dragunov right now. Recent NXT champion, got called over to Monday Night Raw. Unfortunately, has only won one match, but every single match that he has, even though most of them are losses, he's having the best match of the freaking night. Again, I know people are freaking out. They're burying Ilja. He's just becoming Dolph Ziggler. They're using him like Ricochet, but they're going to figure it out with Ilja. We just need to settle down and remember that we're like 4 months into his main roster run, if that, when he got called up in May. No, it's not even been 4 months. So like, let's relax. Trick Williams, I thought, was going to hold the NXT championship for longer. I think he's going to win it back, but he recently lost it to Ethan Page, and he's still kind of just hovering in that picture. I'm sure that he's going to be going after this championship, probably at NXT No Mercy or Halloween Havoc, any of the upcoming major pay-per-views, because he has already called a shot that he wants Ethan Page, and I really think that he's going to be a multi-time NXT champion, and I also think that he could be one of those guys that goes to the main roster and is instantly uber over and is just a merchandise machine. All right, folks, that's it. I'm done. Thanks so much for watching this video. Get out of here. Goodbye. See ya. Bye.